Okay, so we are live on YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, and I will go. Okay, so I won't go on Facebook anymore, so we'll just remain on YouTube.
Okay.
So thank you so much, Father, Reverend Father Dr. Cornelius Okeke. This is the first time we are seeing each other. Like, you know me, but I've known you for a long time now, and I've been reading your books. I've read some of your first book I actually read was Love With or Without Sex. And once I finished, was that the first one you wrote?
Yes, that was the first, yes.
Yes, and very interesting one. I finished reading that one, and then many others as well that came up during that time. So,
yeah.
And I haven't stopped speaking about your write-ups because it's really enlightening, and it's very simple. You know, you have this gift of writing in a very simple terms that anyone who picks up your book will not stop reading it until they finish. So
thank you.
Thank you so much, Father, for accepting to be on this live platform with me and with everyone who is watching us right now. Now, I would like to say to anyone who is watching on Facebook, on YouTube, that we are going to, if you have any question at all on YouTube, feel free to drop the questions underneath, and I will see them, especially after Father finish talking. Feel free to drop your questions. I will see them, and definitely I will ask Father the questions. So, Father, I will leave the stage open to you now. Father will be talking to us about how to conquer fear in general, and how to conquer fear.
Okay. Anyway, this is it's not a new question, because it's a very general issue everywhere, and I know how many counseling I do in a week. You know, people come to you with all kinds of fears. It could range from fear of spiders, fear of spider, fear of flying, all kinds of fears, you know, people have. So, but
Yes.
I will begin by giving a definition of what fear is. Fear could be described as an emotion that arises from a perceived danger or threat. And when a danger or threat, someone perceives a danger or threat, the person enters into the two modes of reaction. Either you fly away from the fear, or you fight it. So that's why psychologists call it a fight or flight. Either of those two modes always come from a fear, but the reaction generates in us physiological changes. You know, physiological changes that one can sense: a rapid heart rate, the heart is boom, 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 the heart is beating, or some can feel sweat in their arms and their hands, or shivering, and all those are physiological changes, or even some behavioral changes. Some fear can make someone run away or hide, and some can also become very extreme and push someone to a paralysis, or what we call a freezing. The person gets frozen, you know, so you can't act, you can't think, you know. So this is so those are two ways. So if you look at it, you find that fear is generally forward looking, that it looks into the future. It's an anticipation of a danger, anticipation of something terrible that is going to happen. It's a gaze into the unknown. So, but then you find that as human beings, in our own evolution, human beings have always, right from the time of first human beings on this world, this earth, human beings have always encountered the situations that threaten their psychological and physical survival. And so you find out that fear actually emerged or arose as a way of trying to protect us from dying physically or psychologically. And so if there is a sound of gun anywhere, you feel already that is you have to run for your life. You have to, so there's a danger. So the body prepares you to do something, either to run away or to fight it. So again, this is the way we have evolved in the human history and evolution, that we are, as human beings, we encounter physical threats, or threats that can destroy us psychologically. So in physical one, I have talked about the sound of gun. But in counseling, we encounter more threats to our psychological survival. Threats to our psychological survival. And what does that mean? To be able to survive psychologically means I can pursue my dream. I have a sense of self-importance. I have a sense of personal value. I feel valuable. I feel lovable. I feel important. And I'm a unique human being. I have an existential relevance, and people can value me. I have a place in the universe. So this is me, that I have a psychological value in the world. If anything threatens that, then I will also have the problem, fear. So that's what happened when I'm afraid of failure. When I feel, oh, I don't want to fail. When I have fears of failure, fear of being humiliated, fear of being dumped by one's loved one, or fear of rejection from a lover, fear of criticism, fear of public speaking. All these things, they all come into the same place. They all come under the same umbrella of psychological trait. Is a threat to psychological survival. So you find that when someone is dumped, the person feels somehow psychologically annihilated. So I have no value. I have no sense of importance. I'm not lovable when someone is rejected, or when someone is criticized. Then the person feels I am not up to, I am not worthy, I am less, I am unworthy. Or someone growing up, he wants to get married, but nobody is asking for her, so she feels, well, my time is running out. She feels I'm a failure. So I am not lovable enough, I'm not beautiful enough, my life is useless. So psychological traits to our psychological survival impresses on us a very big question mark on our personal sense of personal value or personal relevance. And so you see why they affect us more than the physical threat. Psychological threat, we suffer more from psychological threats than threats to our psychological survival than from our physical death. So it frequently happens. So you look at it that all these fears, remember that the fear, first of all, emerged from our evolution to protect our lives, to handle our living so that we don't die. So that death can be psychological, can be physical. But then you find out that even though this natural, normal fear that prepares us to protect ourselves from all threats, physical or psychological, like everything human, at one point or the other, it can become exaggerated. And then it can go off the edge and becomes like a pathological situation. And then we begin to have anxiety disorders. We begin to have someone who cringes and then hides in the bedroom because he becomes so paralyzed. He's afraid of taking risks. He's afraid of the future. He's afraid of what happened in the future. Or again, you can also have people, because of experiences of threats in the past, where they had already had some experience in the past of someone who humiliated them, or somebody who rejected them, or somebody who made a public fun of them. And so those things, those ugly experiences, unpleasant experiences in the past, the person had, which was also a threat to their psychological survival, it can now precondition them to deal with the future. So this is how people move from one experience to begin to develop predispositions towards mistrust or distrust. So people like that become so afraid of being open to new experiences, new relationships. They become afraid of taking risks, to make their lives better. Sometimes they will prefer unintentionally, I use the word unintentionally, they will prefer to stay in their misery or in their mediocrity because of fear of what they had experienced in the past, because of fear of that kind of unpleasant experience repeating itself. So this is an overall picture of what fear does in our lives. And I don't, eventually it can get into bigger issues that get into pathology. People can then begin to overthink, because fear goes with thinking, can begin to overthink. And that gets into people who can develop obsessive compulsive disorders or obsessive thinking. They think so much about their failures in the past or their unpleasant experiences in the past, and they can obsess so much about it that it can lead to all kinds of paralysis in them. So this is just the big summary about the fear. And how do we, looking at the fear this way, how do we deal with it? How does one deal with it? I know the scripture says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I'm going to touch that a little bit in passing before I get into the other one. When the scriptures talks about the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, I don't think this is not the kind of fear that the scripture is talking about. But actually, I think in different nuances of the translation, what the scripture is talking about is not to fear per se. It's not as if God is a dangerous threat to our survival. I don't think that's what the scripture is talking about. The scripture is talking about reverence. It's talking about awe, to revere God is the beginning of wisdom. Is a way of saying when you revere God, when you know God and you reverence him and you come with that sense of awe and inspiration before God, it fills you with wisdom on how to manage, understand life and what life is all about. So I don't think that is the servile kind of fear that the scripture is talking about. Otherwise, there's no relationship between wisdom and this servile fear. And there's no relationship with that. So the scripture must not be saying that when we become so terrified of God, then we're going to be wise. I don't think Solomon wasn't terrified of God. David wasn't terrified of God. St. Paul and all the saints, they were not terrified of God, but they were awed. They had a big sense of wonder before God, and that's what led them into the mystery of who God is. So having made that detour, let me go back to how do we conquer this fear instead of fear protecting you, because when we face danger, our body prepares us to deal with the fear. We deal with that threat. And once we deal with it, then we get on with our normal life. So, but what happens sometimes is that we don't get over that. We don't get over that moment of threat. And so we move on. We stay in a permanent state of fear. And then it can cripple our life. It can prevent us from growing. It can also disempower us. It can disempower us. So how do you deal with this? How do you deal with this? How do we conquer fear? Obviously, fear, remember, I said I define fear as an emotional reaction towards a perceived threat. So everything begins from the perception. And so if we're going to deal with the fear, we have to start with our perception. That means what we think, how we perceive things, what goes on in our minds, because our body reacts to all this. So I think the people who have such kind of fears, they need to work on their own thinking, their own thoughts, their own thought processes, because that's the root cause of the problem. They need to work on their own thought processes. Let me just give an example of someone who has been criticized before, because he was doing a public speech, and then he misspoke a word, or misspoke a sentence, made a wrong sentence out of fear, and then people made fun of him, and then he will never stand up again, even though he's a very smart person. So every opportunity he has to speak in the public, he cows down. He doesn't even take it anymore because the fear has overpowered him. Okay, good. Now, if you look at the story, the Greek mythologies like Odysseus and all these Greek hero stories, you will know one important psychological principle, that all heroes become hero by confronting directly the object of their fear. And so if someone wants to deal with the criticism, with the fear of being criticized, you can't circumvent it. There are no shortcuts to that. But the first thing the person has to do is to know, do I want to be a public speaker? Do I want to communicate? Do I want to make people know my message? If those motivations are very, very high in the person, then you have to deal with the fear. Okay, you have to deal with the fear. So the motivation that you have, the empowerment, the growth that you see ahead, you're going to draw strength from that to be able to confront the object of your fear. And I think that applies to most of the fears, most of those things we fear. It's just like someone who is afraid of flying. The best thing, there's no way, you can't think it. Oh, I don't want to, you can, no matter how you think about it, you must get on the plane to know that you are no longer afraid of flying. You have to get on the plane. That's just the way it is. So, but you do it with what you call a process of desensitization. That is gradually, one step at a time, sometimes. But in a very big, for people who have a very big anxiety disorders, or people who have obsessive compulsive disorder, they would have to need a professional to help them deal with that. So I think that's what I can say about fear. At one point or the other, there are also some experiences of fear that we will need someone who is very supportive, to keep nudging us and say, no, you can do it. No, don't be scared, you can do it. And then somebody to encourage us, and somebody to be there for us to be able to conquer fear. But the first important thing is to begin to help the person to imagine what life would be without the fear, or how my future would be if I were to overcome this fear, and then draw strength and motivation from that. So I hope this is a very short, I hope this is able to do justice to how to conquer fear. And this is mostly fear that is very basically psychological, very basically psychological. So trying to take advantage of that and walk yourself through that. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't go away in 1 day or 2 days. It doesn't. Especially for people who have really stayed in a particular kind of fear, past experiences of humiliation, of rejection, of not feeling loved enough. Those ones take a lot of time. Sometimes you have to go for therapy for that, but it takes a lot of time to deal with some that have taken some root in the personality.
Okay, thank you so much, Father. That's very interesting, and I have actually learned a lot from just this very short teaching that you have just made. Now, talking about fear as well, and you made mention of also trust.
Yes.
Now, there are people who, find it very, very difficult to open up to the others, especially because of this, their past experiences. And they have come to understand that this is normal to them, and for them, they cannot change it. Now, this is one. And then, secondly, someone who always feels that, like, becoming a friend with another, something will always go wrong, either from their point of view or from the point of view of the other person. So, and if something eventually goes wrong, they'll come back to themselves and say, I said it. If I had known, I wouldn't have. I told you. And they find it then difficult to go back into friendship or relationship.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there are two related questions. Yeah, you have to understand somehow we sabotage ourselves. We sabotage ourselves by what they call self-fulfilling prophecies. We prophesy our doom. And then when the doom comes around, we confirm our prophecy. So I mean, this is a general principle. If someone goes into an exam hall and says, I knew I was going to fail in this exam. I knew it. I knew I was going to fail in this exam. And then you find out already the person had gone into the exam with no enthusiasm, with no motivation, with already a disposition to fail. And the person fails and says, well, you know what? I knew it was going to happen. But people don't realize that they do this kind of thing. Somebody who is distrusting of relationships, either because of the past experiences, can enter into this self-sabotaging mode. Okay, good. Self-sabotaging mode. And what do? When they get into a relationship, first of all, they're not going to be open. They already suspect everything the person says and does. And so at a point, the partner becomes worried, becomes even tired of having to always explain this or explain that. And then they say, you know what? I don't think this is going to work out. And the person walks out of the relationship. And the other person says, well, I mean, I said it. I knew it was going to happen. But they already set themselves up. Because if you don't trust the person that you are going to relate with, you already set the person up because you're going to come up with all kinds of behavior and the attitudes that are going to make the person question the validity of the relationship. So that's why it is self-sabotage. That's why it's self-sabotage. So the same thing relates to the other one you said. When people are not open, whether we like it or not, we have to know that life is full of risks. Every relationship is a risk. Every business is even a risk. And look at most of the people who are very successful, either in relationship or in business or in education, it doesn't matter. They take a lot of risk. So to love is to risk, because it also, you are risking to open yourself up and invite someone into the sanctuary of your being. That's not easy. So if someone refuses to open up and the person keeps banging on the door of your heart, it keeps almost banging all the time and you don't want to open it, and the person goes away, you say, I knew I was going to be dumped. Exactly. So this is it. But then there are also some personalities that are disposed, that are more inclined, that have more tendency towards suspicious life, towards being distrustful. People who tend to be paranoid, by the way they were raised, will eventually become suspicious, become mistrusting of people, of relationships. People who tend to be obsessive compulsive in their personality, they can be so perfectionistic that they can drive people around and crazy. And so eventually they might end up being alone. So there are different factors, but basically it boils down to the same thing. Because a paranoid, it distrusts every person. A perfectionist is afraid of taking risk. So, in one word or the other, this is basically the fundamental point of that. Yeah.
Okay, and then there is also the someone has been asking me all the time that she's afraid of getting married. Not due to past experiences of herself, but because of seeing what has happened in the family. So she
Okay.
believes that in the family, no one has ever gone into marriage and survived. You know, there's always been cases of separation, divorce, troubles, crises in the marriage. And for herself, she thought it's better she does not go into marriage, you know, because she believes this will still be her fate.
Yeah. Yeah, this is very interesting because this person is a classical example of determinism. she, she feels she is completely determined, so she has no power. So you see, something like this, the person has already sold herself out to fear. Exactly. So why would she not be different? Why would she not come back to say, you know what? I really want to get married, but I want to make my own different. I mean, even though we are all born by a mom, the same mother, but we are still different in our choices, in our decisions, in our values. Okay? So, but she doesn't think about that. She already feels that she has no power. And I tell you, that is sense of powerlessness is already is a sabotaging tool. So she goes into, if a man comes into her, she's getting into that marriage prepared to leave, that marriage is gonna fail the next day. So she's already prepared. Why do we know? So the best thing is whether she actually wants to get married. If she really wants to get married, she has to convince herself why she wants to get married. Or does she feel that does she feel that she's not going to be able to make it because of her or because of what happens in her family? So if she really wants to get married, she should give herself up to that and say, you know, my sister failed, but I'm not going to fail. And then you see why it is very selective. It's a very selective thinking, which already is an example of sabotage. She has also forgotten that there are also some families where you find some people might have failed in their marriages, but there are also some successful ones. Why wouldn't I be different? Exactly. So some people will say, you know what? I better hurry up because my mom died at the age of 55 and my dad died at the age of 60. So I better hurry up with my life because I'm gonna die at 55 because my mom died at this. And the person comes to me and say, you are different. Your makeup is different. And this guy I'm talking about eventually is 74 now. I say, you beat your mom, you beat your dad. This is why that's one of the fallouts of determinism. When we think that we are very powerless, we don't have a choice. Tell that this kind of girl, this person should know that she still has power of choice. She has power to choose how her marriage, how her relationship is going to go.
Okay, so now I received a question via YouTube, and it says, how can one deal with the fear of helplessness, a situation where you feel stuck and for any action or changes you make, you lose altogether?
Yeah. Helplessness helplessness is a kind of when I was describing fear, it's like being frozen, being stuck. Yeah. Actually, you know it. More of the same will take you the same place. When you are doing more of the same thing over and over again, you are still in the same place. I like to describe it like a rocking chair. You know, you are in a rocking chair and you are moving like this. You are rocking the chair. You are in a chair rocking. That's what helplessness does. You are not making any movement, even though you have been here for the past 2 hours or 3 hours or five. Even if you stay there for months, you're still in the same place. What happens? How to help a person like that? Someone else could help the person, pull the person out and change the direction of the person. That's why Einstein says we cannot solve a problem by the same principle that led us into the same problem. We have to change it. Okay, so in some problems to pull out of self helplessness, we cannot approach the same helplessness with the same approach that led us to the same helplessness. But sometimes people who are in a helpless position, they can't see. They can't see it. They no longer can imagine differently. So they need someone to help them reimagine a new situation, reimagine a situation to be able to pull them out of that. So it could be done by a friend or it could be done by a professional. But sometimes people are afraid of even seeking for help. So that's what I can say with that. The people, somebody in a very helpless situation needs to be helped to be pulled out of that and change the direction.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, I remember that Einstein statement that one cannot solve a problem with the same mindset that put them into that problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and it has always been very, very helpful. And then there is also this fear that looms, especially in our Nigerian culture. I call it fear. You know, when I asked you about fear of God, here I call it also fear of the men of God. You spoke about it when you talked about prophecies. So fear of the men of God, that someone would see that there is so much deception in what they are going into. For instance, someone arranges with a particular man of God, as they call it, to go for deliverance in their home. And then they will call the person and say, you must provide this, provide that, provide this, provide that, provide this. The person goes ahead to provide all these, instruments, all these materials. And then at the end, the Igbos would say, "Na ife na-eme aka na-eme," what used to happen continues to happen, and nothing changes. And these people keeps going back to this particular person who keeps telling them they have not, you made mention of you did not kneel down well to pray. You did not, this person keeps telling them that. Maybe either you didn't kneel down well to pray. I told you to pray at 3 o'clock. You woke up at 3:05, or you woke up at, 2:55. You should be able to wake up at 2:55 and pray exactly at 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. or 6 p.m. Now, and these people end up having this great fear of the men of God. And, what do you have to say about that?
This should be a topic of its own.
I
A
know.
topic of his, yeah, is a very big problem. And what the one basic general idea I bring to this is the tendency in the Nigerian culture for people to hand over their lives to outside. It's like a surrender of a sense of personal responsibility. And when you surrender your sense of personal responsibility for your life, you know what it means? It means you surrender also your thinking, your capacity to think, your capacity to reason. Because then you tell me what to do, then I'm gonna do it. Because so even if you tell me what to do and I do what you asked me to do and it doesn't turn out right, I don't have the capacity anymore to even question that, because if I have the capacity to question that, I'm coming back to myself to take the own responsibility for my life. So what we find in the Nigerian context is what I call externalization of problems and externalization of responsibility. People are scared to be responsible for their own lives. So if I didn't get married on time, someone must be responsible for that. If I don't get as many boys as I want in my marriage, someone is responsible for that. If I goofed up in my business and it fell, someone is responsible for that. So it is all constant surrender of personal responsibility. So this is basically this. And when you hand over your sense of self to someone else, you know what it's gonna mean? You know what it means? You will be perpetually under fear, because then you become like a marionette. You become like just a string. The person can pull you out, manipulate you with a remote control. So that's why people are so afraid. That's why people are so afraid. And there was a time I went for a retreat somewhere, and I saw this person, this girl. She dreamt of getting married. She dreamt of getting married. She was 22 that time. I was in one of the polytechnics and went to the priest, to this man of God, so-called man of God. And the man of God told her that because she had this dream, it means that she had a connection with the water something, waterman, or she had a husband in the sea, or whatever it is. So, and then he gave her a list of what to do in the family. The girl the girl eventually left the school. When I saw this girl 6 years after, I could not believe it. She was so haggard. She was so unkempt because she completely lost herself. And she had not even completed doing all the rituals and everything that were prescribed for her. Because you know what? She surrendered her life to that man of God, that so-called man of God. Those deceptive people. Because Nigeria is teeming with many men of God or women of God, because they are not men or women of God. They are just prophets. People who are seeking for power, people who are seeking for money, people who are seeking for fame. But they find these gullible people who are so scared, who will hand over their lives to them. So that's all I can say about that. People have to take back, realize that they have the power of choice. They have the power to make their lives what they want their lives to be. They have that power. That's what God gave us. When God gave us free will, gave us intelligence, gave us rationality, that's what God gave us. But it is very easy, very, very easy to feel something in your life and have someone to blame for it. That's
And
all over the world. People love to blame people for their
yes,
problems.
and we may actually digress a little bit, because I'm seeing a question here via YouTube. Someone is asking, how can someone, a man or woman, even though after you answer this question, I will still come back to this particular one, because you've made mention of blaming someone else, because that's another topic of its own.
Yeah.
But this one is saying, how can someone, a man or woman, who has got kids from different women or men, find the right person to settle down with? What is the best way for one in this kind of situation to do, find or know the right thing to do?
You know, this kind of question comes all the time because they want someone to tell them.
Yes, of course.
Because we don't want to risk. This is risk. They don't want to take risk. We wish we have like how we have charts. If you press 1, 2, 3, then 1 plus 1, you get 2. We wish that in normal life we can find the same kind of mathematical application to human relationships, to everything we do. There are no easy ways to get around it. But in every relationship, you have to look at yourself. You have to learn to listen to your heart. You have to also learn to follow your instincts. So if you meet a guy, if you meet a woman, your gut instincts tells you whether this person is meant for you. After some time, you know whether this person is your whole body, your whole mind, your whole soul will be able to know whether this person, there is some connection with this person. And what is that connection? What is that connection is saying to you? But you find out sometimes when people are looking for the right person, they're not telling you the whole truth. They're not looking for the right person with whom they have a connection at the level of the soul, at the level of the spirit. But they are looking for someone with whom they can feel financially secured. They're looking for a husband to be able to, or a wife they want to settle down with. They're looking for this. They're not looking for connection. Okay, they're not looking for a companion. They're not looking for that. If they are looking for companion, it's a totally different thing. I've always said there are two ways of seeking for who is the right person. starting from yourself. You have to first of all check whether your motivations come from inside or whether they come from outside. So external motivations will be, oh, I'm old now, I better get married because my mates already got married, so I better get married. Number two, that's a very external. Number two is, I want someone who is going to be able to provide for me and then be able to take care of my parents. That's the second. Third one, I don't want to marry someone from this side. I want to marry someone from this particular area because they are very successful people. That's so odd. And then I want to marry a man who has a lot of muscle. I want to marry a girl who has so pretty, who has a brown, who has all this, who has a lot of, who is good on makeup. We have all these things. They are very external. All these things are very external. So if those are motivations that are driving you, you will end up being disappointed. But then there are internal motivations. I'm looking for someone with whom I can have heart-to-heart connection. I'm looking for someone who is going to be my companion for life. If people are asking that, you know what? Your heart is going to tell you that. When you come in contact with that person, after a while, your soul is going to tell you that. It may be disappointing. It may be disappointing. I give you one example before, one girl said, I want to marry a man. I don't want to, I want to marry someone who is 5'7", 5'8", someone who is very tall, who is very huge, who is very masculine, who is this, She found one. They dated for 7 years. They dated for 7 years, and the guy said, I don't want to get married. I don't want to get married. And it was terrible. It was terrible. And she knew it. And she said, okay. So the relationship broke down. And then she got into another one, the same kind of person, and this person has a lot of money. The person said, no, I don't want to get married. Eventually, she married someone who is 5'4". Who is 5'4". But this person is 5'4", but has an incredible love for her. They have such good connection. They have such beautiful companionship. And so when eventually, after how many years we met, and then she said, this is the way she said it: God's ways are never our ways.
Exactly.
Yes. God's ways are not our ways, because you are following something else, but your heart is following something else.
Oh, thank you so much, Father. Now, you made mention of blame, because sometimes we fear to blame ourselves. Sometimes we fear to tell ourselves the truth. So most times you find people who blame the other. You find people who blame another person, who would always want to blame another person, even for that which they themselves know that it is their own fault. But because they are afraid that once they blame themselves, they will feel guilty, and the feeling of guilty would somehow lead them into anxiety. So what do you have to say about people like this?
It's immaturity. It's one of those things we call, one of those factors that express or indicate that someone hasn't grown well. It's lack of maturity, because it's a mature human being that we should be able to say, I made a mistake here, and I'm responsible for this. Whenever anyone fails to acknowledge his or her responsibility in something that is so obvious to him or her, the person is saying, I haven't grown up. And so this is why you can have so many adults, but they are adults, but they are children in adult body. They are children, but they are children inside. So one of the hallmarks of maturity is to be able to recognize that I made a mistake, and there is not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world that I made a mistake. But if instead of me making a mistake, taking not, I don't call it taking a blame. I call it taking responsibility for my action. You know, taking responsibility for my action. It's like a it's like a child who failed. You know, he came back with all F's in the report card. You know, and the dad asked him and said, why all this F in your card, in your report card? Why didn't he said, and he said that the person who the smart guy didn't come, the smart kid didn't show up for the exam. So he's not responsible. It's the guy, the kid who is smart, you know, he didn't show up. So he is responsible. Because if he had come, then he would have been able to look into his paper to be able to pass the exam. You know, so this is a so people like that is an indication of immaturity. So people like that should be able to grow up. But there are also those who, by their personality, will find it so hard to take responsibility for any action. It's always people's fault. And you know what they are called? People like that are called? They are called narcissists. They are called narcissists. Narcissists will never, ever take responsibility for anything that
Anything.
goes wrong in their lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even within their marriage as well. Even
It doesn't, whatever.
it's very dangerous to actually marry a narcissist, because that is where you find serious issue. Either the man, then the woman will continue to bear the blames of anything that goes wrong, including when he breaks the plates.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then if it's a woman, the man will continue to bear responsibility for everything that goes wrong in their union, in their marriage. Now, can there be
Exactly.
positive fear? Can
Oh,
fear
yes.
be positive? What is
Yeah.
positivity? What makes fear positive?
Well, I've already said, when I was at the beginning, I have already mentioned that fear came, the fear grew, emerged as a react, as part of our evolution in the story of our evolution, because fear helps us to avoid danger. Okay, just like the Igbo people will say, "Onye aṅụ gbara na awọ fọkpọrọ ka ije ofe pụọ ọsọ." So in the same way, fear helps us to be, it's like antennas. Fear helps us to protect ourselves and be more careful so that we don't keep going through the same mistakes over and over again, or to harm ourselves or harm others. So this is the positive side of fear. Fear is helpful, but it has to be healthy fear. It has to be healthy fear. Healthy fear will help. It's just like you are going into the exam and you are so scared or you feel jittery. It's not unhealthy to be able to fear the unknown. But then it becomes unhealthy if that fear prevents you from achieving a goal that you had already set out to achieve. It becomes unhealthy. So fear has a positive aspect to it. Yeah.
So this person kind of is still in big dilemma, because he feels seriously that he has got two kids,
Okay.
and in making efforts to get married to someone, he ends up, getting to the person ends up referring to those two kids.
Okay.
Yes, you've got two kids, so I'm afraid getting married to you. I don't know what has happened that you've got two kids. So
Okay.
he finds it very, really, very difficult to get someone to marry.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay. Well, this is not really a fear issue. This is more of a social stigma. It's more of a social stigma. Where people, the girl. I mean, that person will have to keep on praying and hoping. Sometime he will be able to find someone who will take him as he is, who will know his story and still accept him as he is, and still open up to his love. It's more of social stigma because some people, in some cultures, I don't want to be identified with, you're marrying somebody who has already been married or someone who has two kids. So And that will also give the girl, in some cultures, even in Nigerian culture, some of them will feel, you're marrying like a, you're not married, don't consider this as a new marriage. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think it's more a social stigma he's dealing with. So I don't think it's a question of fear.
No, it's
So
not.
to someone like that, the only thing I'm gonna ask that person is to be hopeful. That one day he'll be able to find someone who will give him chance to be able to listen to his story, and then give him, take the risk and get into a relationship with him. Otherwise, there's nothing he can do, because he already has kids. So those are social issues.
Oh, very
Yeah.
good. Yeah, and social. There are really social issues. Now, someone here is asking, um, can a stagnation in psychosocial development in early childhood also be responsible for distrust in adulthood?
It's very possible. Obviously, in a Ericksonian level, stages of development, trust is the fundamental. Is the fundamental. When a child, when children are born, when babies are born, and um, everybody comes and begins to pick the baby, and the baby doesn't cry, okay, because the baby does not yet know who is who. So after a while, you'll find out that some babies will just attach themselves to the mother, and they will not let anyone touch them. And if the mother leaves her to someone else and moves away, the baby will cry so terribly. You know why? Because the baby believes that when the mother goes out of sight, it means she's gone. Okay? So this is the time, babies, this is the time we develop trust or mistrust. So if a child does not grow past this to develop what is called object permanence, that child might have problem in the future, especially if the child does not have a good mother, does not have a mother that cares, that tries to reassure the child, or if the mother keeps going and never comes back. There are so many factors that can come into that. But so the bottom line is, we all grow to be able to develop that object permanence, which is another way of saying the trust. So at a point, the child can play with other people and know that mom will come back. Mom will come back. So this is it. So it's very possible that some people who don't have problem with trust mistrust may have problem in the future as adults.
Oh, thank you so much. And then there is also another question. It says, how do we conquer the fear of try? Although you've actually answered those, but maybe you can also shed more light. How do we conquer the fear of trying new things, fear of taking risks, fear of failing without even making an attempt?
It's the one thing there is, somebody said that if you desire something and desire it so hard, so strongly, go for it. You know, exactly, that's what it is. Unless something, you see, this is what imagination does. When I imagine myself to be here, to be there, the strength comes from that imagination. I imagine myself now playing guitar, and I'm afraid of learning how new instrument, But if I think of myself sometime I will be on a stage and entertaining everybody. That I say, you know what, I'm gonna be able to do that. So so oftentimes people don't imagine what they are gonna be. They don't imagine themselves strongly enough, constantly enough to be able to be there. And this is my own experience. I speak a few languages now because I just want to be able. I imagine myself. I say, I came here. I knew English language, but there are a lot of people speaking Spanish here. So I said, no, I want to be able to one day to sit down with them and they'll be able to talk and laugh in their own language. And I had to begin to. So I went and started studying it. So now Everybody's asking, when did you learn it? When did you learn it? And but it's the same thing with every new thing we try. Every new thing we try. However, there are things you might want to try, but you don't have the not the desire, but you don't have the ability for that. If you don't, I'm not mechanical. I know I'm not mechanical. If you get something now and you ask me to begin to fix it, read the directions and fix it, I tell you I cannot do that. So I don't even have motivation for that. So, but if you imagine something very, very that you desire, something that is very wonderful for you, reimagine yourself where you're going to be. I want to be a teacher. I want to be a doctor. I want to be an engineer. I want to be this. Imagine yourself that place. And that will give you the strength you need to overcome all the hurdles and all the obstacles. Does it make sense?
I think it does to me, but I will still wait to get the reply from the person who asked the question. Now, there's another question here. She says, how can you deal with fear of believing and trusting, which kind of relates to the former one, fear of accepting and reciprocating affection and feelings when shown to you?
Fear of reciprocating
affection and feelings when shown to you, fear of believing and trusting, accepting and reciprocating affection and feelings when shown to you.
I always, my book, Love Without Sex, I made a distinction between two kinds of relationships. If a relationship is the primary, that means if somebody is coming to you with hope or with the hope of developing a primary relationship, that means a one-on-one personal, intimate relationship with you. And if the person is coming to you with that, and you are on the same page with the person, okay, you cannot there's no way but then be open to that. But if a person is coming to you with affections, with all the demonstrable signs of affection, but the person wants a primary relationship with you, but you are not disposed for a primary relationship with the person, you are disposed for a secondary. That's like a classmate or colleague, or just to be an acquaintance with the person. Okay, so this distinction has to be clear, because that distinction helps you to understand the boundary, the kind of boundary you are putting in a particular relationship. And that is going to help you know how and to what extent you will open up, you will reciprocate, you will respond to the person's show of affection. But if it is confusing to you, whether it's a primary relationship or a secondary relationship, then you're going to be confused on how to react, how to respond. Okay, so this a person who is asking this question should be able to ask herself or himself, what do I want in this relationship? Do I want it as a primary relationship, or do I want it as a secondary relationship? And what does the person coming to me, showing me affection, what does the person want? Sometimes somebody might want to just have a pastime relationship, or somebody to be somebody to talk to, so there are different levels. What level is that relationship? The level of relationship will tell you how to respond effectively, affectionately.
Thank you so much, Father. Now the questions are here. How do we get your book, Love With or Without Sex? I've got like 2 or 3 persons asking that question. And
it's on Amazon. It's on Amazon.
I've just written Amazon here. And then another one people would like also to read is When Love Runs Dry.
Yeah.
It's another interesting book, which I would like also to invite you on another day so that we can discuss that particular book, When Love Runs Dry.
Okay.
Yes, Father. So thank you so much. I would like to say thank you for spending this time with us. Thank you for, giving us this opportunity, to experience or gain from your, wealth of experiences. Do you have any last words for everyone who's listening or anyone who is going to listen later on?
My last word will be, don't let fear ruin your life. Don't let fear stop you from being the best version of yourself. Don't let fear, and don't hand over your life to anyone. Be the person a man of God, a woman of God. Don't take back your life, the life that God has given you, and make the best of it. You have the resources within you. You have the power of choice, and the power to be the best of yourself. And good luck to all of you.
Thank you so much, Father. Thank you.
God
And
bless you.
Faith Chat platform wishes you all the best and blessings.
Thank you. God